Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time again. It is time for yet another episode of the In the Huddle Sports Podcast, episode 81. And man, oh man, are we excited today. My crew around me, per usual, is the real Lil, Cam Jones, a.k.a. Coach Mello, Zach Kroll, and myself, Kenny C. And ladies and gents, we have a very special guest on today joining us by the name of Lake Lewis Jr., the Washington football team NFL insider, TV analyst, and owner of SportsJourney.com. He also has his own podcast called After Practice with Lake Lewis. Welcome to In the Huddle.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you for reaching out and having me come on.
Yes, sir. So I want to start this off by asking, can you share how did you get into this industry, the media industry that is, and what are some of your notable and most memorable experience that you had so far in this industry?
This goes back. I'm a lot older than you guys, so I don't want to date myself. But, this goes back to actually being a kid. When I was a kid growing up in D.C., I always wanted to be involved in sports. So I ended up playing basketball and football, played basketball and football through varsity. And then I played basketball briefly at Penn State. So, it was just something I wanted to do. But while I was at Penn State, I got the opportunity to become the student sports director for WPSU Radio. And that led me to being the student play-by-play for Penn State football for 3 years. And, from there, it opened up a lot of doors for me. And, I was fortunate enough to say I have on my resume, I was a drive time radio host for ESPN Radio, where my daily show was done from Disney World, actually, from the ESPN Club. Also was a senior reporter for USA Today covering Washington when they were the Redskins. So I've been around the block a couple times. So right now, having my own thing with Sports Journey, I'm appreciative of all the support that I've gotten, even from some of my old colleagues at the other places where I've been. They make frequent appearances and stops on Sports Journey. So that's my project, and it's something that I want to do. And it's also a platform to give young aspiring people like yourselves opportunities to have a platform that's credentialed with all the major four sports leagues in the United States. So I'm proud of that accomplishment.
And now, with that being said, with the great resume that you have, how big truly is networking, and how big was it for you in your journey?
It's huge. This is a business where a lot of people don't have longevity. I know plenty of people that were in the business before me that now are, IT technicians or, salesmen or whatever you have it. They just didn't make it. And so, to be doing this 16 years later, steadily, I'm excited about what my future holds. But, as far as the networking side, you have to link up with the right people, because unfortunately there's some people in this business that don't want to help people. I know people don't like me coming out and being candid about that, but I vividly recall a couple of athletes didn't want to come on my show when I was at Disney. And then once the show took off, they were having their people call me all the time, and I just told them not interested. So, you have to be humble in this. When you get opportunities to help other people, you do that. You guys gave me a call and you may not have thought it was possible, but I'm not one of those guys. I remember being in your shoes at one point, and you guys have a really nice show. It's something to keep pushing, keep doing it. It'll get to where you want it to go. So I wanted to come on and, help you guys out a little bit.
Yeah, that's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my next question for you, Lake, would be, so you mentioned briefly about your time in Penn State and how really being the football team's play-by-play announcer really led to opening doors for you after college. So my question for you is, besides that, when you first got out of college, what would you consider to be the turning point of your career? Was there any break or two that you got that really helped you in the industry? Because I feel like for a lot of people in the industry, that's really one thing they refer to. They say, oh, this was the turning point, and this is how I really got my first opportunity.
Oh, I vividly remember the turning point. The turning point was, so my background outside of media is medicine. And at one point I wanted to be a doctor. At Georgetown, they had a post-bachelorette pre-med program that I was part of. And I realized quickly I'm not smart enough to do that. So I had to get back. But so I was working actually in the health industry, and I was a pharmaceutical recruiter, research recruiter. And just so happened to be that the Baltimore Ravens and Ravens Radio sent some people over to try to see if they could do some advertising with my company. And they had me meet with them because of my background. And they offered me a job on the spot to leave where I was and come work with them. And I got in there. I was, selling radio ads and different things, but I always had my nose close to the broadcast booth, and, talked to some folks, and they were like, I didn't know this was your background. And I'm like, yeah. And it just so happened to be that ESPN Radio in Orlando was just starting, and they wanted to bring people in who could do multiple things, who could sell radio ads as well as host the drive time shows, and I'm like, that's me, I can do it. And I flew down, and they offered me the job on the spot and asked me, could I start the following week? So I did, and I lived in an extended stay for 2 months, so it was one of those things where it was my dream was right there in front of me. Now, everything that was around it wasn't necessarily the ideal situation where you had a month to, relocate or whatever, but I wanted it. And I have been doing this ever since that day. So, it works. If the opportunity is there, it may not be your ideal situation, but if it puts your foot in the door, you got to put in that door and keep it open and run with it.
Thank you.
Wow, Mr. Lewis, I must say I'm pretty impressed that you really took the leap and faith into this industry. I just want to know, down the line, did you face any adversities prior to becoming a sports radio analyst?
I mean, it's tough. It weighs on your family at times. I mean, you're gone a lot. You're working. Media is something that it's not a 9-to-5 job. A lot of people out there have normal jobs where they know, for instance, that they're going to get paid the same amount of money every 2 weeks, regardless. They know that, that they could actually take a day off mentally if they want, whatever their job is. They could be in the office, or now that we're home in COVID, but they could just take a day off mentally, go through the motions. But you can't hide in reporting. You can't. I mean, if your work is shoddy, the fans know it. If you write things and there's spelling errors constantly in it, fans are going to know it. If your diction isn't proper when you're on the air, fans are going to know it. And for me, I'm not just writing and doing normal quote unquote beat reporting. I'm doing TV stuff now outside of my own business, so it's been a lot of work, but I think the adversity just makes you stronger. It makes you know what you need to get better at. And you never feel like you've arrived, so, I appreciate you guys, calling me a special guest, but I'm still Link. I'm still same kid from Northeast DC. I live out in Ashburn now, so it's a little different, but with all that said, I still try to stay humble, and I still try to help where I can. And I think that will keep you from having really bad adversity if you stay humble.
Gotcha.
So I'm moving here to, from your career into talking about the Washington football team a bit here. I know you was there when the Washington football team was called the Washington Redskins. Yeah. So to see the Washington football team change their name, and you see, other leagues and other teams in other leagues follow that same suit. What do you think about that?
I think it's super powerful. I mean, it's something that needed to be done. I mean, look, no one wanted to see the name change just because of the history of the team. And for people, my age, if you're in your 40s, if you're in your, late 30s, you recall this team being what you guys would consider like the Patriots. They were the gold standard, and it was Super Bowl or bust. It wasn't just making the playoffs. I mean, that was a given. It was if they didn't get to the Super Bowl, the town shut down. It was bad. So to see it now, to see, the name change and, everything that they're going through, I've always said this. No one wants to see it because it gives old timers like myself a chance to hold on to the good times. But if this team went out this year goes out and somehow miraculously wins a Super Bowl, or if they win a Super Bowl realistically over the next 5 years, I mean, they could be called, the Washington dish pans, and no one's going to care. You're going to see dish pans gear all over the place. Everyone wants to attribute themselves with a winner. And I think that is something that led some fuel to the name change, and from the outside forces coming at them to change the name, because they weren't doing the name any justice, by losing and having just all the chaos and drama that was part of Redskins Park.
And now getting into the talent on this football team, at the starting quarterback position, taking over week 9, Alex Smith, a guy whose story is incredible, should, in my mind, be the comeback player of the year, with a guy who went from maybe not even being able to walk again to doing the unthinkable and starting for quarterback again in his career. So did you or anyone else in the organization think that Alex Smith will be called upon to again take the driver's seat and lead the offense to success the way he has?
I know I didn't. I'll be the first person to say I admit when I'm wrong. I actually said this offseason that, and even when he made the final roster, I actually said it's a feel-good story. It's because he's a good guy. He's a great human being, first and foremost. And, I looked at it like the team was doing a good gesture to put him on the roster so that he could get his money. He could get that guaranteed $64 million. However, he's proved a lot of people wrong, and I agree with you. I don't even think there is anyone close to even being considered to be comeback player of the year but Alex Smith to overcome what he's done. And everywhere he's been, I think people need to remember when he was in San Francisco, they won football games. When he was in Kansas City, they won football games. And he's winning games here. As a starter, I think his record here is like 10-4. So they win football games everywhere he's been. They're going to need him on the field for the next 2 weeks if they're going to try to get in the playoffs.
Yeah, one more question about Washington. It's funny because I remember when I was first getting into football, I had a relative that lived in D.C. So I remember the Jason Campbell and the Clinton Portis, Santana Moss, Chris Cooley, guys like that. Those teams were fun to watch. But going back to this Washington team in 2020, I feel like everyone talks about the defense and Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera, the job they've done. But I think that if I'm Washington, I look at my offense and say, I got Antonio Gibson. He's had a phenomenal season. Terry McLaurin has been a great story. Cam Simmons had that great game against the Steelers. Logan Thomas, another great story. There are some weapons here.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the offense has started to produce some players, and that's a great point. They're just all unheralded people. So they didn't come with the glitz and glam. Terry McLaurin was a third round draft pick. I'm sorry. But a lot of people didn't even know him at Ohio State. I mean, outside of the state of Ohio, he was like the third or fourth option on that offense at wide receiver, not overall, but I'm talking about at his position. There were a couple guys that went higher than him in the draft at his position from Ohio State. And look at what he's become. He's having a surefire Pro Bowl season. A couple weeks ago, he was close to having an all-pro season. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we know quarterback situation does a lot for you as far as you're not getting the ball. And now teams are starting to double team him. He's got a guy over top of him on every play now. So that's a testament to his game. Antonio Gibson was really starting to come into his own before the toe injury. Hopefully, he can recoup from that. That's a painful injury to have, especially for a running back, guy that cuts and does a lot of things, plants on his foot. Cam Sims, a lot of us have been waiting for this for 2 years. He's a guy that always showed glimpses during preseason games and in training camp. I was always tweeting, man, this guy Cam Sims from Alabama looks like he could be special. Right. And it just never worked out. I was good friends with Ike Hilliard, who was the wide receivers coach for several years here. Now he's wide receivers coach in Pittsburgh. And Ike used to tell me all the time that Cam has a lot of potential. Jay Gruden was just trying to figure out, is he a guy that you put on the outside, or is he a guy, ironically, with his size that you put in the slot? Well, I think they found his natural niche on the outside here, and you're starting to see him play better. And then Logan Thomas, I mean, he's been one of the more steady players on the roster, period. And I think he's definitely played himself into a nice long-term situation here as the team's tight end, or if not one of their two tight ends. I still think they need to draft one, but I think overall he's definitely figures to be part of their plan going forward.
Awesome. Mr. Lewis, since Ron Rivera took over the head coach for the Washington football team this season, what changes has been made towards the organization so far?
I mean, it's just a professional outfit. I mean, I started covering this team kind of off and on 2011. I was covering the Ravens at the same time. But since I started being here full time, like 2013, I've great friends on the team. A lot of them are gone now because they were older. But I'm talking about guys who used to come to my house for dinner. I mean, I knew so many guys, but at the same time, I never saw a cohesion and a tightness that I see now with this team. And it's a good feeling to see. And I think you see that these guys play for each other. They never quit. I mean, yesterday was a game that, let's face it, at halftime, your starting quarterback's not playing, your starting running back's not playing. You're down, 20-3. It just, against a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. And they damn near came back and almost stole the game yesterday with their backup quarterback. So, I just think what Ron Rivera's done is he's come in and brought a level of professionalism and accountability that they hadn't had in a lot of years, at least years that I've been here. And I think it's showing on the field that this is a dangerous up-and-coming team that I'm going to say it. If they do make the playoffs, I don't care who it is going to have to come here for that first game. They're going to be leery and know that they're going to have to come out and fight for 60 minutes against Washington.
So you know how terrible the NFC East been this year, and that has not gone over the media's heads and all the fans and everything. Everybody know the NFC East has not lived up to, I won't say expectations, because normally each year it comes down to the final week anyway that decide who wins that NFC East. But we didn't think it was going to be this bad. So
no, I don't think so. I don't think a lot of people thought it was going to be bad. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So there's a lot of talk about the Giants and how there was this 0-5 team, and Joe Judge came and changed the culture of that organization, and they're getting a lot of love. But when I look at the Washington football team, I seen a team that went through trial and tribulations throughout the whole year, with the quarterback situation, with the allegations coming from the women that worked in sports, with Juan Rivera taking IVs at halftime. Do you think that if the Washington football team is able to win this division, able to get into the playoffs and make some noise, do you think this is the biggest story and the biggest success story in the NFL?
Listen, I'm not going to say it's number one, but it's definitely might be 1B. I mean, I don't think there's been, and I'm not saying this because I covered the team, but I don't know if there's another sports franchise, professional franchise, that has gone through more adversity over, a 6-7 month period greater than Washington. And I don't care in any sport. You change your historical name. This is one of the oldest teams in the NFL, in football. And they had to change their name. They basically changed their whole brand. You have to change your front office because of the allegations and things that happen inside the building. That's another, catastrophic thing you have to overcome. Then you're bringing in a coach. And then as soon as your coach gets here, he finds out that he has to deal with cancer, so that's a tough blow right there. And then on top of that, you have a young quarterback that's not playing well. And, then you bring in a guy that had one of the most gruesome leg injuries anyone's ever seen. And, the guy not only almost lost his leg, but he almost lost his life. And now he's coming back. So it's like every week for us in the media, we kept saying, my God, it can't get any worse. And then there was another storyline every week, one after another after another. Now the team's starting to turn it around. They're winning some games. I truly believe in my heart that had Alex Smith and Antonio Gibson played yesterday, they would have beat Seattle. I don't think that's a far-fetched thing to say when they had the ball, less than 2 minutes left with the chance to win the game with backups. So, I agree with you that they've had just a crazy year. COVID, we didn't even mention that. They're dealing with that on top of this. So you have all of the above, and they find themselves in a playoff race. And if they win their last 2 games, which I'm predicting that they will, that's 8-8 for them. There will be no more talk about a losing record team, making the playoffs. They would be 500 and having won, I think, what it would be like 6 out of their last 7 if they can accomplish that. Hey, I mean, that's how you want to make the playoffs. That's how you want to go in there.
And real quick, just because I need to know your thoughts on this, man. A beast among men, the number 2 overall pick in this year's draft, Chase Young. How big and how impactful has his presence been for this defense, and how do they plan to maximize his potential going forward?
Man, I mean, the sky's the limit for him. You know, one of the things that doesn't get talked about as much as it should is, and I noticed this from day one, I noticed this from the first game of the season, Chase Young doesn't really sit down on the sidelines when the offense has the ball. He's standing up. He's right near the coaches. He's near Ron Rivera. He's near Scott Turner at times. I mean, you know, he's near any coordinator that's on the sidelines. And for him to do that, it just goes to show you that he's a team player. And I know like 2 weeks ago after one of the games, Ron Rivera told us, he said that Chase Young has this energy that's just rubbing off on his teammates. And, you know, before yesterday's game, before the game started, you know, all the guys were going up to each other on the sidelines, hugging each other, dapping each other up. And it's just something you haven't seen. So to see that from a rookie, a guy that you know is going to be one of your faces of the future long term, that's a big deal for this organization. So he was more than just the talent they drafted. I think he was a kind of a steadying force, like an old soul in a young man's body. And they need that. But his play's been stellar. I mean, he's clearly been one of the top rookies in the NFL.
And he's a good guy, you could tell, because one of my favorite moments of this season was when Joe Burrow tore his ACL, and you saw Chase Young right there, you know, showing the brother love because they both came out of the same draft class, 1 and 2. Yeah. So he just laid a hit on him to play like a couple plays before, and to see that moment, that was one of the moments right there that stuck with me.
Yeah, I mean, and they played together at Ohio State. You know, obviously Joe Burrow transferred to LSU, so they had history there. But, you know, that's the other thing. You know, Terry McLaurin is you know, probably their face on offense, and he's a young, humble guy. Every time he talks to us, it's about the team. It's about what he can do better, what he didn't do to help his team win. So it's not a whole lot of look at my accolades, look at who I'm becoming. I just don't sense that with the guys on this year's team. And I think that's a tribute going back to Ron Rivera, their coach. You know, you do take on the personality of your coach. Joe Judge in New York, I think he's done a phenomenal job. They're playing tough, hard-nosed football there. That's who he is. If you look at the dysfunction that's going on in Philadelphia as far as quarterbacks and guys talking, well, unfortunately, that's a product of your coaching staff because some of them aren't on the same page. We don't even need to talk about Dallas, I mean, because they've had their own issues too with their coaching staff. But when you look at the great teams in the NFL, it starts at the very top. And when you look at the Andy Reids and you look at the Sean Paytons, stability means something in this league. And Mike Tomlin, got to mention Mike Tomlin. I know Pittsburgh's kind of sputtering a little bit now, but still, to see what he's done, stability does a lot, man. And if you have a coach that is respected and feared at the same time in the locker room, I think you're going to see a lot of great things going on, and that's what they have here. Ron Rivera is respected, but make no mistake about it, no one's jumping up to get beat down, so to speak. You know, if they have an opinion of something with him, you're going to do what he asks you to do.
Yeah, as you said, the Washington football team right now is in a really good spot to win the NFC East. They control their own destiny with the last 2 games. And one thing that I've really noticed about this year's team is that early in the season, they were losing some games. Even though there were some signs that they were improving, they lost that game to Detroit. They got swept by the Giants. So there were some moments where, even though there was some optimism, I kind of thought to myself, okay, I don't really know how far this team could go. And then obviously when they went into Pittsburgh and won, I got the statement like, all right, this defense could go into anywhere and just wreck a game. They're that good. When did you kind of realize, okay, this team may be better than we all expected?
I thought it was week 1. I mean, the Philadelphia game, the way they came back in that game and kind of signaled that Philadelphia was probably going to fall on some tough times this year, that was a sign. And then also, I think the week 3 game against the Browns, you know, Cleveland looks really good. I mean, you saw what they did last night to the Giants. They dismantled them. You know, the way they moved the football, the way they were doing things. And I know it was early and Cleveland was still figuring some things out. But that was a game that despite how bad Haskins played in that game, I think he had 3 interceptions in that game, they still hung around in the fourth quarter. They were kind of around in the game. And you started to see, you know what, this is a team that's not going to give up. They're going to fight. If they can just put it all together for 60 minutes, they'll be able to win some games. And I knew it wasn't going to ever be pretty. I mean, I knew that they weren't going to ever really just totally steamroll teams like how they did the Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day. But,
right.
But you knew that they had a defense that was good enough to keep them in games. And you just were hoping that Haskins would get it together. You were hoping that Kyle Allen could be a steadying force. But I've told people, and it's on record, I mean, you can look it up. I said it on ABC. I said it on my own outlet that I knew in that building and in that locker room, take nothing away from the other two quarterbacks, but those guys love Alex Smith. And they know he's a true leader, and they play for him. They rally around him. I had a good friend of mine. I tell people this story too. A good friend of mine who used to work in Kansas City when Alex was there, when the trade was happening. Therese Paler, he's doing stuff for Yahoo now. He called me and was like, you guys just got a leader of men. You're going to love him. And that's what happened, So I knew when he came back in, things might start to change. And I told someone in the press box, wouldn't it be crazy if Alex Smith came back and was, comeback player of the year and also led this team to the playoffs? Whoever can get the book rights for that's going to make a lot of money.
Cam, we have just about 3 minutes if you want to ask one last thing.
Well, Mr. Lewis, one last question. So,
Sure.
Is the Washington football team expected to change their name for the 2021 season, or like they will still remain as the Washington football team?
I mean, I can't answer that verbatim, but if you're asking me just to say my own opinion, what I think's going to happen, I think they're keeping the name. I think they're keeping Washington football team as the name. I still think they're going to come up with a logo and a nickname, excuse me, and it could be very similar to, the New York Football Giants. No one says that. It's the New York Giants. So it still could be the Washington football team and still have the branding of it, 1932, all that. But it could be the Washington football team Warriors, something like that. And I actually think that's where they're going.
Okay.
All right, man. Thank you for coming on, man. We appreciate you spending your time out of your schedule, and we hope that you have a good Christmas, a very Merry Christmas with you and your family.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me come on. And like I said before, you guys stay tight, stay with the same vision, keep pushing, and you guys will do some great things. And anytime you want me to come on, just give me a buzz. I'll come on, okay?
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. We really appreciate it. And that's Lake Lewis Jr., ladies and gents. This has been another episode of the In the Huddle Sports Podcast.